Vulnerable narcissists rarely demand loudly. They're usually not the type that you're having these, big arguments with, like you can with the grandiose narcissist. Vulnerable narcissists imply, they infer things, they give you the silent treatment. If you've ever walked away from a relationship with a covert narcissist thinking, why do I feel so confused? Was it really that bad? Or am I the problem? That self-doubt is not a flaw. It's actually a symptom. And today I want to explain how and why covert narcissists create it. At first, we need to clear something out because what most people call a covert narcissist is actually what we refer to in the research as a vulnerable narcissist. And vulnerable narcissists do not look the way people expect a narcissist to look. They're not loud. They're not flashy. They're not walking around with an air of, look how great I am, kind of confidence. Vulnerable narcissists actually come across as sullen, withdrawn, depressed, even anxious. A lot of people, even therapists, initially assume vulnerable narcissists are just struggling with depression because that's how it looks. But here's what makes it really tricky, because vulnerable narcissists can also look really nice. They can be soft-spoken, unassuming, very innocent, but almost like too nice, like you have something to hide nice. But they definitely don't have that, over-the-top, grandiose air from the start. And that kind of presentation of being nice and unassuming and innocent mixed with a story that they tell you about how people have just mistreated them. They've been betrayed. They've been misunderstood. That's a powerful combination, especially for us helpers. I'll put myself in this category, especially for helpers, fixers, people with strong empathy, because the primary emotion you feel around a vulnerable narcissist at first isn't fear or amazement or awe or attraction. It's usually pity. It's sympathy. It's protectiveness. You feel sorry for them. You think, oh, they've just been through so much. And you just have this overwhelming desire to help them or to understand them. But here's the part people miss. Vulnerable narcissists are still narcissists. The entitlement and the grandiosity just looks different. So a grandiose narcissist says, world, look how great I am. A vulnerable narcissist says, why doesn't the world see how great I am? Why is everyone always out to get me? Why doesn't anything ever go my way? But the underlying belief is the same, that I'm exceptional. I'm special. I deserve special treatment. They just express this entitlement through victimhood rather than arrogance. And this is where your self-doubt really starts to build. So let's walk through this 4-step process of how this happens, because the confusion that you're feeling from being with a vulnerable narcissist didn't just happen. It was intentionally built over time. So the first step, you form a bond through responsibility. So a lot of times in the beginning of a relationship with a covert/vulnerable narcissist, you feel needed and helpful. The vulnerable narcissist is opening up to you about how much they've been hurt. They're sharing with you their stories of supposed betrayal. They talk about how no one has ever truly understood them. Maybe no one has ever understood them the way that you do. And so they're so glad to have found you, because now they can finally feel understood and supported like they've always wanted. And if you're an empathetic, kind-hearted person, which I'm guessing that you are, you do the most natural thing a kind person would do. You reassure them, you support them, you problem solve with them. And it feels good to help because that's who you are. You help because you're a helpful person. But what you can't and don't imagine is that this is actually the beginning of the cycle of abuse. Because what happens over time is that the support you're giving them starts to become expected. You're the one who's regulating their emotion. You're the one who's stabilizing the relationship. You're the one who's making the accommodations, who's sacrificing themselves. And then you do this for a while, given, that you are a giving, empathetic kind of person. But at some point, maybe you start to pull back. You start to share your needs too. You voice that the relationship is just really starting to feel unbalanced. And then what happens is that they say you're abandoning them. You're just like everybody else who hurt me, who left me, who said that I was too much. They call you selfish. They call you the difficult one. Maybe they even call you a narcissist at this point. So you notice how after that, you stop helping out of choice and start helping out of obligation and guilt. And guilt is a very powerful glue because your nervous system gets attached not just to the person, but you get used to being in that caretaker role. Now you're bonding not through true unconditional reciprocated love, you're bonding through responsibility. And then trying to step back, trying to set boundaries, or trying to change this dynamic in any way feels like you're being unloving or uncaring or mean. And certainly the narcissist is telling you that too. The second step that creates more self-doubt comes from the fact that vulnerable narcissists hide their entitlement inside of helplessness. Vulnerable narcissists rarely demand loudly. They're usually not the type that you're having these, big arguments with, like you can with the grandiose narcissist. Vulnerable narcissists imply, they infer things. They give you the silent treatment. They sigh when you say you're going out with friends again. They start to withdraw if you start doing something for yourself or stop going over the top for them. They make comments like, "Ooh, must be nice not to worry about money, to have money, to come from money. I guess I'll just handle things on my own like I always do." So you feel pressure. You feel that anxiety building on the inside to help or rescue them without them ever directly even asking you to do so, but you feel it on the inside. And then if you try to set a boundary, even bring up the dynamic that's happening in an attempt to try to solve it, then they call you cold, uncaring, insensitive. And over time, you being the self-reflective person that you are, you do start questioning yourself. You start wondering, am I being too harsh? Am I overreacting? Am I being the selfish one in this relationship? And this is where reality really starts to blur because what they're doing doesn't look like abuse. It doesn't look like aggression. It looks like fragility. And as a kind-hearted, empathetic person, that pulls on your heartstrings. But that fragility can still be manipulative when it's used to control your behavior. The third way they create self-doubt is through intermittent warmth. So in any narcissistic relationship, this is really important to know. So I really want you to hear this. In any narcissistic relationship, no matter how bad the abuse, there are good moments. There are moments when they're grateful, when they notice what you're doing for them, moments when they're affectionate, moments where even they seem self-aware, times when you think maybe they're getting it, maybe we're turning a corner here. And those moments keep you invested. Those moments keep you thinking they can change, they can get it, things can get better. Like a better relationship is just around the corner. It keeps you hopeful. And hope is a dangerous word in a narcissistic relationship. But because you think there's a possibility for this tension, for this chaos to end, your brain starts getting even more motivated to chase that relief, to chase the end of the tension. So you start thinking, well, if I just say this better, if I just reassure them more, if I just try harder, because sometimes your efforts work. Sometimes they seem to get better. Sometimes they seem to get it. And your brain and your body, this is just how we're wired. We're wired to keep chasing a reward if we think that a positive outcome is on the other side of that. So we're more motivated to keep chasing that reward because it works sometimes. And this kind of hot and cold cycle is called intermittent reinforcement, and it is the most powerful way to keep someone hooked on something. Think of gambling. You don't win every time you pull the slot machine lever. You win sometimes. And that unpredictability keeps you playing. And that is what's happening in your relationship. You don't stay because it's always good or because it's so good. You stay because sometimes it's good. And there's the hope that it will get better. And that inconsistency, ups and downs, highs and lows, mixed with the hopeful expectation and anticipation, keep your nervous system activated and attached to them. And the fourth and final way they create self-doubt, at least that we'll cover in this video, is through undermining your reality. These are the conversations that leave you most confused afterward. It's the small comments they make. Things like, "You're just too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that. You always twist my words." Or they reframe events in a way that really makes you unsure of your memory, makes you question whether you're remembering things correctly. Because vulnerable narcissists often present as wounded and soft, you assume you must be misinterpreting them. You think they're not malicious, they're just struggling. And so you ignore your intuition telling you that something is not right here. And every time you override your intuition and your gut feeling, your self-trust weakens, and then the self-doubt grows stronger. So just to bring this full circle, here is how vulnerable narcissists create self-doubt over time. First, you bond through responsibility. You start off helping because you're a caring and empathetic person, but slowly your support becomes expected. So you shift from loving freely, giving freely, to feeling obligated. And then when you try to step back, guilt pulls you back in. Secondly, their entitlement hides inside helplessness. They don't demand things loudly. They imply, they withdraw, they infer, they frame themselves as the victim. So when you set a boundary, you actually feel cruel instead of clear. You feel like you're being mean to them. And that often keeps you from setting boundaries for a long time. Third, intermittent warmth keeps you hooked. There are good moments, hopeful moments, just enough to keep you trying harder. And then that unpredictability strengthens the attachment you have with them instead of weakening it. And then fourth, they consistently undermine your reality through these subtle comments, through reframing things, minimizing your needs, what you say, what your values are. You start questioning your own perception, your ability to believe yourself. And then every time you override your intuition, your self-trust erodes a little more. And that's how the confusion builds. Not because you're weak, you're foolish, you were too sensitive because you should have known better, but because the abuse was slowly destabilizing your sense of what's real. So if today's episode helped you put language to something that you've been feeling, you've been just sensing in your bones, in your gut, but you couldn't quite explain, I want to offer you a resource that goes much deeper, because in my book, If Only I'd Known, I walk you through 6 different types of narcissists, including the vulnerable type that we talked about today, so you can start to see your experiences more clearly and stop minimizing what happened to you. But the book isn't just about identifying patterns. It's really about healing from these relationships, healing from the trauma bond. I break down why these relationships feel so addictive, why the guilt lingers, and then how to rebuild self-trust step by step. So if you're in that place where you're really still untangling what was real and what wasn't, and you're trying to make sense of it, and you want to know how to heal, this book was written for you. You can actually get the first chapter for free. I'll link it in the description and show notes. So until next time, remember that no matter where you are in your healing journey, resilience can be restored, and we will keep building it together. So I'll see you in the next episode.